It is said the earth remembers what the mind forgets, and in the still, breathless places, beneath moss-draped cypress and black water hush, the memories of the land stir like spirits in sleep. Have you ever felt that strange hush just before twilight in the swamp, when even the frogs go quiet and the air tastes like something waiting? That's when you are nearest to her, the first daughter, the woman who was not born, but made, not by mother or midwife, but by river mud and moonlight, by thunder cracking over the bayou like a whip of God's own grief. They say the swamp gave her up one night, offered her whole like a secret it could no longer keep. She was called Delaire, though none are sure if it was her name or the word for what she became. Delaire of the Delta, Delaire the Whispering One, Delaire, mother of Hoodoo. Her skin was like burnt copper washed by rain, and her eyes shone yellow in the dark, like a panther caught in lightning. She did not cry when born. The midwife fled, but the owls came and sat on the roof, silent and watching. They say the storm didn't break until she opened her eyes. From the very beginning, the swamp obeyed her. The snakes came when she called. The birds flew in slow circles above her shoulder, silent. She could make a wounded thing stop bleeding with the laying of hands. She once made a fever leave a boy's body by breathing into his ear, soft as a prayer. But no one knew where she came from. Some say she was left by a woman who had bargained with spirits too dark to name. Others said the swamp took pity on the world and gave it a protector. But the old ones, the ones who watched and waited and listened, they said she was born of a sorrow older than the land itself. They said the earth birthed her to remember, and so it was. She lived alone on a spit of land that barely held a house, a leaning cabin made of rotted planks and charm. Cypress knees rose like twisted roots from the black water all around. No road reached her, only flat-bottomed boats, and even they would not always return. People came with offerings, chickens wrapped in red cloth, locks of hair, silver coins tied in string. They came for healing, for revenge, for knowledge of things best left unknown. And always, she knew their names before they spoke them. She did not smile often, and when she did, something behind her teeth flickered. Not unkindness, not cruelty, but the glint of knowing. The way old trees seem to watch you without moving. She spoke little, but when she did, her voice was low and wind-bent, like a hymn sung through wet wood. Her words stuck to the skin. Salt and honey for sweetness, she'd whisper, tying knots in black string. A mirror buried in the earth sees only truth. The ones who knock 3 times don't answer. They're not coming for you. They're coming for the debt. People said she could call back the dead, not with seances or dancing, shadows, but with silence. That she once brought a boy back who had drowned in the marsh by placing a crow's feather on his chest and whispering into the space between his ribs. He lived, but he never spoke again. And his eyes would follow empty corners of the room as if something stood there, always watching. She had rules too. She never allowed mirrors near her home. She burned rue and cedar on every full moon, and no one was ever allowed to enter her circle of stones without offering blood. A finger prick, a mosquito crushed on the wrist, a cut from the cypress thorn. It was not cruelty, it was protection. Her most whispered story, the one carried farthest, was the story of her love. They say Delaire once loved a man made of music, a fiddle player from the north, pale and freckled like stone-washed clay. He came down the river in a red boat, with a song behind his eyes and the devil in his smile. He played tunes that made even snakes lift their heads and sway. She let him into the circle. No one knows what was said, only that the bayou went quiet for 7 days, that alligators floated belly up and the fish would not bite, that even the wind turned backwards. They were seen together once, laughing under the full moon, her head thrown back, his hands around her waist, fireflies all around like stars fallen into water. But love, even in the swamp, is not safe. He betrayed her, or so the stories say. He played a song on the fiddle one night that opened a door no one could close. Some say he did it out of curiosity. Some say a bargain. Others say he wanted to bind her, keep her soul within a song. But the door opened, and something came through. That night, the swamp howled. People in the quarter said they felt the heat rise through the floorboards. Trees bled sap, frogs exploded, thunder cracked and did not stop. When dawn broke, the red boat was found torn in half, floating downstream. And she was changed. Her hair turned white as bone. Her voice went quieter, yet deeper. And in the place where she once stood when she called the dead, a new tree grew, gnarled, twisted, weeping sap that burned the skin. She never spoke of him again, but once a year, on the night of the blood moon, she would play his fiddle, just once, and the sound would carry for miles. A single note, clear, cracked, and full of grief. She lived many years after. Some say she never aged. Some say she lived backward, that her bones grew younger, her eyes older, that she became less woman, more shadow. The last time she was seen, she was standing in her circle of stones, whispering to the wind. A great snake wrapped around her arm, still as stone. She lifted one hand. The swamp rose, not in flood or violence, but in silence. Fog covered the cabin. The trees bent low, and when it cleared, she was gone. Only the circle of stones remained, and a crow feather tied with red string. And to this day, children born under strange moons are said to carry her mark, a crescent birthmark behind the ear, or eyes that glow faint in dark water. She is remembered not in books or sermons, but in the way hush falls before storms, in the scent of cedar smoke drifting through the quarter, in the rustle of Spanish moss when no breeze stirs. And when the river runs high and the moon burns low, some say she walks again, not as a ghost, but as the memory the land could never forget. Have you ever heard music that made you cry, though you could not say why? Not for sadness, but for something deeper, something ancient, a mourning that didn't belong to you, yet lived inside you all the same. That's what it was like when Etienne Black played. He didn't play notes, he played doors. He was born on a storm-wet morning in Trem, beneath a sky stained violet with thunder. His mother said he came into the world humming. His cry was a rhythm. His first breath had syncopation. They said the angels argued that day, not over his soul, but his sound. From the age of 7, Etienne walked with a brass cornet tucked beneath one arm and a limp in his right leg. A fever had twisted the bone, but he never cursed it. He said the limp made his shadow dance differently, and that mattered more. He practiced not in music halls, but in the alleyways, where sorrow bled down the walls and gospel echoes clung to bricks. He played in backyards where funeral dirges were still remembered. He played to the cats and the ghosts listened. They say his music could call the dead. Not like in stories, with candles and chanting, but simply, softly, truly. He'd blow a single, aching note, and the shutters would tremble. He'd play a slow, winding line in the dark, and the air would turn cold as river stones. People whispered that if you followed the sound, it would lead you to those you had lost, not in body, but in memory, in breath, in presence. They said Etienne played at every jazz funeral, but never stood among the mourners. Always on a rooftop, always barefoot, always vanishing before the last note died. One woman swore she saw him atop St. Augustine's bell tower, playing while the bells stood still. Another said he once played outside her home on Basin Street, and her husband, dead 3 years, appeared in the mirror just once, smiling. Etienne never explained. He only said the veil was thinner than folks believed, and music was the sharpest needle to thread it. But not everyone liked what he could do. There were those in the quarter, quiet folk who wore keys around their necks and salt in their shoes, who said that calling the dead without asking was a dangerous thing. One such woman, an elder root worker, known as Auntie Calla, once warned him. "Boy," she said, "you think you play for joy, but the dead, they dance for debt." Etienne only smiled and replied, "Then let me play their due." That was the kind of man he was. Restless, joyful, haunted. He played at midnight. He played at funerals. He played in silence when no one was listening, especially then. And then came the Mardi Gras, when everything changed. The city had never seen a season like it. The rains were strange, sweet with the scent of iron and memory. The beads shone too bright. The floats moved too slow. People said the air felt thick, like it was holding its breath. Etienne played that year with a fire in him. His notes curled like smoke. Every time he played, people wept, even if they laughed a moment later. Some said he was calling something. Others said something was calling him. Then came the night of the ghost parade. It began like any other second line. Brass bands, twirling umbrellas, satin sashes flaring in the light. But just past Congo Square, the procession slowed. The drums faltered, and a strange hush fell. Out of the mist came a second parade. No colours, no music, just silence. They walked with bare feet and blank eyes, dressed in white, faces soft as wax. People parted, unsure what they were seeing. Etienne didn't hesitate. He raised the cornet and played. Not jazz, not dirge, but something older. It was a sound like bells beneath the sea, a hymn without language, a breath inside a breath. And the ghost parade began to move. Their steps matched his rhythm. Their feet beat against the cobblestones, raising no dust. They turned corners without touching the earth. They moved not as mourners, but as those returning. People stood frozen. Some cried, some turned away. But Etienne walked with them, limping, playing, eyes closed. And then he vanished, not into fog, not behind a corner, but mid-step, mid-note. One moment there, the next, gone. Only the cornet remained, lying still on the street. For weeks afterward, the city felt lighter, the air gentler. Bells rang without hands. Dreams came softer. Some said Etienne had crossed into the other side, finally playing for the ones he always heard. Others said he became music itself. But listen, sometimes, just before dawn, when the city is quiet and the mist hangs low over the levees, you can hear a single brass note, long, low, lonely, and comforting. The kind of note that makes you feel both seen and unseen. And if you close your eyes and follow the sound, you might find yourself walking just behind him, in a parade that is not meant for the living, yet welcomes all who listen. So when the wind carries music that no one seems to be playing, don't be afraid. It might only be Etienne, dancing still. For what is death to a man who plays with ghosts? Have you ever seen a house that seemed to breathe? A house so still, so heavy with silence, it presses against your ribs before you even cross the gate. There is such a place on Esplanade, just past the bend where the streetcar turns, where the air smells like lemon balm and slow decay. It leans behind iron fences curled like cursive, hidden under a canopy of magnolia trees that bloom all year. Round, though no gardener tends them. People walk faster past it. Children go quiet near its gate. Even pigeons avoid its roof. But once, not so long ago, it was the most desired address in New Orleans. It was called the Magnolia House, and within its flower-choked courtyard lived Madame Rosette, who wore perfume made of memory and always spoke in whispers. She was not born in the city. She arrived on a riverboat with a velvet valise and a black cat in a wicker cage. No one knew her true name, though her accent curled like honey around thorns. French Creole, they said, but older, with traces of islands and empires long buried. She was a beauty, yes, but not in the way that drew men like moths. She was the kind of beauty that made people uncomfortable, like looking at a full moon too long. Lovely, yes, but something about it watched you back. Rosette bought the house with gold coins no banker recognized. She restored it with her own hands, painting every shutter blood red, every stair with salt under the lacquer. She placed mirrors in odd places, behind doors, inside cabinets, tucked under beds, not for vanity, for protection. The Magnolia House soon became the most whispered name in the quarter, a place where music played at all hours, where laughter rose like incense, where women wore satin and pearls and never spoke unless they chose to. But there was power beneath the velvet. Rosette was a hoodoo queen in silk gloves. She offered no services. She made no claims. But those who crossed her threshold often found their luck. Altered. A sick man would be seen walking upright the next morning. A cruel husband would vanish, leaving only his boots. A woman scorned would smile and hold a garnet pin at her breast, and suddenly her rival would lose all taste for gossip or breath. They said Rosette brewed her potions behind green doors, stirred not with spoons, but with bone-handled combs. She could scry in tea leaves, knot fate with embroidery thread, and bind curses into ribbons no wider than a whisper. But Rosette kept only one rule: no blood in the house, no violence, no threats, no rage. Her home was sacred, a place of silk, song, and secrets. And for years it stayed so, until a man named Henri Duval crossed her gate. He was a sugar baron's son, with hands soft as linen, and a voice that made promises like prayers. He came under the guise of curiosity, bearing roses and letters scrawled with poetry too old to be original. Rosette saw through him at once, but still she let him in. Why? No one can say. Perhaps even queens grow lonely. For a time he was careful. He learned her herbs, her rules, her silences. He kissed her fingers and never questioned her offerings to the crossroads. But desire is not devotion, and soon he broke the rule. One humid night, a quarrel flared. A girl in lace spilled wine on a dress not hers. Henri's temper cracked, and a glass shattered. Words rose, then hands, and the house exhaled. The gas lamps dimmed. The music stilled. The mirrors clouded over. Rosette stepped into the parlour, her voice no louder than breath. "You have brought blood into my house," she said, gazing at the girl's wrist, where a red thread bloomed. Henri stammered, ashamed but unrepentant. "It's just a scratch," he said. But Rosette did not blink. She walked past him and lit a black candle in the hearth. "Leave," she whispered. He didn't. He laughed, a soft, cruel laugh. And that was the end. No one knows what she did. Only that the next morning, Henri was gone. His cane remained by the door, his boots sat by the hearth. But his name was never spoken again, not even by his family. The girl. She recovered, and from that day forward, she wore a magnolia blossom in her hair, no matter the season. But Rosette changed. She became quieter. The music in the house slowed to lullabies and low hymns. Visitors came less frequently. And beneath the great magnolia tree in the courtyard, a strange stone appeared, a carving of no saint, no name. Just a face with no eyes, mouth open in song. The tree began to bloom out of season. Its blossoms were dark red, and when they fell, they left stains that no water could remove. People said the tree had roots in two worlds now, one in soil, one in shadow. Years passed. Rosette grew older, though her face remained untouched. But one day, she gathered the women of the house and gave them each a mirror. "To remember who you are," she said, "when the veil thickens." Then she disappeared into the attic. No one saw her again. The house remained quiet for a long while, until one spring, a child threw a rock at the gate, and 3 knocks sounded back. But no one stood there, only the heavy breath of silence, scented with magnolia and memory. Now, they say, if you pass the house after midnight and whisper your sorrow through the gate, you may feel something stir, a hush, a warmth, a presence. Some say Rosette listens still, guarding her house from beyond. Others say the house itself remembers her vow, and if ever blood is spilled on its floors again, it will wake. And so we remember the oath in the Magnolia house. No blood, no cruelty, only truth, woven in silk, sealed in scent, buried in blossoms. Have you ever seen a church cry? Not in metaphor, not in dream, but truly, stone-faced saints weeping from their alcoves, streaks of black trailing down marble cheeks, as if even holiness could mourn. It happened once, in New Orleans. And though the priests deny it and the tourists pass without seeing, the old ones still speak of it in hushed breath. They say it began with smoke, not the kind from hearth or pipe, but something bitter, like burned parchment, old incense, and scorched feathers. It drifted down Royal Street before dawn, curling around shutters and under doors. The dogs refused to bark. The bells held their tongues, and in the square before St. Louis Cathedral, the mist lay thick as wool. Only one figure stood awake. He wore black robes cinched at the waist with red thread. He had no name anyone remembered, only a title whispered behind closed doors. Father Soot. He came to the city like shadow after fire, just before the first blaze that took a quarter of the quarter. No one saw him arrive. No ship, no papers. Just a sermon written in ash, posted to the door of the cathedral, calling the sinners home. And oh, how he preached. Not from the pulpit, but in alleyways, under balconies, on street corners where children played. He spoke of fire as truth, of pain as purification. He kissed the forehead of a beggar who never woke again. He lit candles in places where no flame should be. And yet, people came. Not because they believed, but because when he spoke, something moved in their bones. He wore no cross, only a carved medallion. A serpent devouring its own tail, ringed by 13 tiny nails. He never blinked. He never smiled. He was never seen to eat. The priests within St. Louis Cathedral tried to bar him. But strange things happened to those who defied him. One went blind for a day, eyes clouded with smoke. Another found his Bible rewritten. Every page inked in red, every name crossed out but one, Mireille. No one knew what it meant. Still, Father Soot preached. And behind him, things began to burn. Curtains, shrines. A lace shawl caught fire in the hands of a bride. But never wildly, never without purpose, as if the flame knew what it sought. Then came the morning the saints wept. It was a Sunday, cloudless, hot. The square was packed with faithful and curious alike. Father Soot stood before the cathedral steps, hands lifted not in blessing, but beckoning. And inside, something stirred. The candles flickered, the air turned thick, and then a sound. Low, long, like stone breaking underwater. The statues lining the inner nave began to cry. Not water, but smoke. Ash-streaked tears running from carved eyes, leaving marks no cloth could erase. Gasps echoed. Some knelt, some fled. The organ began to play, though no one touched the keys. A hymn not found in any book. A dirge sung in a language older than Latin. And above it all, Father Soot smiled for the first time. Then the bells rang, 13 times, though the ropes were still, though the air was still. And then silence. Not peace, but silence that held breath, that watched, that waited. And Father Soot turned and entered the church. He walked the aisle alone, trailing smoke like a cloak. At the altar, he placed something beneath the cloth, a book bound in skin. No one dared stop him. And as he reached the nave's far wall, he pressed his hand to the stone and vanished, not disappeared, vanished, like a flame snuffed by its own breath. After that, things changed. The tears stopped, but the stains remained. The medallion was found embedded in the pulpit, the serpent now broken, its tail snapped clean. The book, gone, but the whispers stayed. of sermons never spoken, of prayers turned backwards, of names erased from stone. Some say Father Soot was never a man, that he was a reckoning, a sin come home. Others say he was a priest who made a vow too strong, too deep, and paid with fire. But no one forgets that day, and if you visit St. Louis Cathedral in the right light, just as the sun breaks through a storm cloud, you might see it. The faint trace of a tear etched forever into the cheek of Saint Cecilia, a shadow near the altar, shaped like smoke, and if you listen, a bell, distant, faint, ringing not for the dead, but for what still lingers, because some fires do not die, they simply wait. Have you ever stood at the edge of a river and felt it watch you back, not with eyes but with something older, something patient and deep? The Mississippi flows through New Orleans like a lifeblood, carrying stories, secrets, and sorrow. It remembers everything, the laughter and the loss, the promises whispered in boats, and the cries lost beneath its waves. And beneath those waves, they say, there lives a woman. Some call her Delphine, others Mercy. Few know her true name. She was once a bride, waiting on the shore, dressed in white, a veil tangled with river reeds and driftwood. They say she waited for her love to return from the waters, but the river took him instead. On that night, when the moon hid behind clouds and the bayou held its breath, she stepped into the river and vanished beneath the glassy surface. But the river never let her go. They say she became the river's own, a spirit bound to water and sorrow, neither alive nor dead, but forever caught between tides. On nights when the river swells high and slow, and the fog hangs thick over the levees, fishermen swear they see her pale face rising from the currents, her eyes like polished shells, watching. She sings a song, soft and haunting, that drifts through the reeds and willows, carrying both warning and comfort. No one who hears it forgets. And they say, if you listen closely, the river sometimes brings her dress ashore, torn and sodden, white as bone, trailing with water lilies and moss. Those who find it are never quite the same. Some become silent for days, speaking only in whispers. Others say they dream of walking beneath the water, hand in hand with a woman whose smile is sadness itself. There is a story told by the old Cajun women who live along the bayou, of a child who vanished one flood season and returned months later, eyes shining with the river's light, speaking in voices not his own. They say the woman beneath the river claimed him, but left a piece of her sorrow behind. Delphine is not a ghost. She is a memory made flesh, a reminder that the river remembers every promise broken, every love lost. And when the floodwaters rise, she walks the edges of the city, silent and unseen, gathering what the river has taken and what it has spared. Some say she is mercy itself. Others say she is mourning. But all agree, to cross her path is to face the deep truth of loss. The woman beneath the river holds no anger, only longing. And when the river calls, it is not death that comes. It is a beginning, a turning tide, a whispered breath between worlds. And so the river flows, forever carrying her story beneath the surface, in the silence of the deep. Have you ever heard a bell toll when no one is near? A sound that ripples through the quiet streets, soft as a breath, heavy as a secret. In New Orleans, at the edge of an old cemetery, where moss clings to stone like memory, there hangs a bell no one dares to ring. It is rusted and worn, its rope frayed by time and weather. But sometimes, just before dawn, when the mist is thickest and the city still sleeps, it tolls once, not loud, not many times, just a single, slow ring. They say it is the bell of the veil, the threshold between the living and the dead, between what is seen and what is hidden. No one knows who rings it. Some say it rings itself, drawn by a force unseen, a summoning from beyond. Others say it is a signal, a calling, a warning. Long ago, when New Orleans was younger, a child was born in the shadow of the bell tower, but this child bore no shadow. not because of light, but because of something deeper, a mark between worlds. They say the child was cursed or blessed. It depended on who told the story. The child grew different, quieter, more watchful, eyes that saw too much, breath that held too many secrets. On the night of the bell's first toll, the child vanished. No trace remained but a crimson thread, tangled and knotted, caught on the bell's clapper. The people whispered of a vow made that night, a blood oath between worlds, between the child and the unseen. They say the bell tolls when the veil thins, when the dead reach out, when the boundary blurs, and those who hear it are marked. Some disappear, others change, and some are called to walk between. In the years since, many have sought the bell, to ring it, to answer it, to silence it, but none have succeeded. For the bell tolls only once, when it chooses, and those who hear it feel the weight of 1,000 forgotten names. The silence that follows is deep and endless, like the breath before sleep, like the edge of a dream. They say the bell's sound holds the sorrow of all lost souls, a sorrow that is not pain, but memory, not anger, but longing. It is said that those who listen well may hear a whisper beneath the toll, a voice without words, a prayer without language. And if you find yourself standing before the bell at dawn, in the soft hush before day, and it tolls for you, do not be afraid, for it is not an end, but a beginning, a passage, a story still unfolding. And when the bell tolls at last, it is not alone, because on the other side waits the keeper of the veil, a child without shadow, a soul made of silence, a guardian of stories, and the bell's echo carries her name, forever.